Hello, and welcome to the Marketing Guides for Small Business podcast, where we tackle the real world challenges small business owners face every day. I'm Ian Cantle, and I'm excited to dive into today's episode where we'll be discussing how to outcompete your competition, even in the most saturated marketplaces. But before we get into that, let me welcome Jeff Steck from Tylerica Marketing Systems out of Austin, Texas area, and Paul Barthel from Chainscape Web out of St. Charles, Missouri area, and Ken Tucker, unfortunately, isn't able to be with us today, but he has pre-recorded his answers, so he's still going to be involved just virtually. So let's talk about the reality of competing in a saturated marketplace. It's not super easy, but it can be done. A saturated local market occurs when the supply of a particular product or service within a specific geographic area exceeds the demand, leading to intense competition among businesses. And in this scenario, many businesses are offering similar products or services to a limited customer base and often feel like they need to discount their services. And as a result, businesses in these markets often struggle with price competition, reduced profit margins, and challenge to differentiate themselves from their competitors. So let's take a look at this and see how we can outcompete our competition in a saturated marketplace. So Jeff, let's first of all ask the burning question. Can a small business actually compete and thrive in a saturated marketplace? And if so, can you list some of the top ways they can do this?
Yeah, absolutely. And absolutely is the answer to that question. Um, Competition is good. It makes everyone better. It doesn't mean that you can't win, right? You just got to be better. Every competition has winners and losers. And, in the marketing world, most things lead back to strategy. So that's where it all starts. If you have a solid strategy, then you can definitely outcompete and win. So, if you look at what are some of the elements of strategy, what are some of the things you need to think about in your business, it keeps coming back to the things that should sound very familiar from listening to this podcast long. You've got to start off knowing who your ideal clients are. One thing you can do is focus on a niche, right? Be not trying to be all things to all people, but be the best thing for a certain segment of people. You don't have to win the entire market. You just have to win enough to grow your business, to meet your goals, personal and financial, for your business. So you can focus on a niche. You can absolutely, every business has to have a unique value proposition. What sets you apart from other businesses doing the same thing? When you can create that difference, that unique value proposition, unique selling proposition, you've got something that makes people kind of gravitate toward you and choose you. If they can get the same old thing from 5 other people, but they can only get this one extra thing from you, they're going to want to do business with you. So have a unique value proposition, then use that in your messaging. Make your messaging clearly communicate that. And that's ideal client is the niche who you're trying to reach, and branding message of difference, unique value proposition, right? From there, then you can start crafting customized solutions and focusing on the experience, focusing on personalization, a lot of things we're going to talk about later. You really want to set yourself up as the business of choice, the vendor of choice, the supplier of choice for whatever target market you're going after. Have that strong brand identity, involve your customers in telling your story, tell your own story. Just don't be a me too. Use your expertise, leverage expertise. All of these things come together to build the know, like, and trust that you need an audience to get through to decide to do business with you. And even though the market may have a dozen other people doing the same thing, they aren't really. You just got to do it a little better, a little more specific, and make sure that's clearly communicated. And then leverage your marketing strategies to do that. That could be offline, could be events, but of course, digital and online are a big part of what we do. And then follow it up with great customer service. And you can't just say great customer service is our differentiating factor, because what does that really mean? You have to, walk the talk. You've got to prove it. You got to show it, and then get other people, your customers, to talk about it. When you do those things, it's absolutely possible to compete and win in a saturated marketplace.
That's a fantastic lead in. One of the things that occurred to me while you were talking about that, Jeff, is that, what and maybe this isn't a fair question to you, right, out of the blue, but and Paul, feel free to jump in as well. But what are some of the common minefields that businesses fall into in a saturated marketplace? I mean, the obvious one is price reduction, discounting. Do you see any other things that businesses tend to fall into?
I think, in general, not just saturated marketplaces, but I think in general, business owners just have to get out of their own heads. They have a certain view of this is the way it is, this is the way it's going to be, this is what's happening. And it may be based on past personal experience, it may be based on past experience in the business. But every iteration, every time around the merry-go-round is a little different. One of the things people will ask is, what can I expect, working with you as a fractional CMO or as an agency? And we can give them general terms, but I'd say, look, I have not marketed your business before. I have not marketed your business in this environment before. Things change. And my point in saying that from my point of view is to take it back to the business owner's point of view, which is you got to get out of your own head and you've got to be open to things are different every time around and not just lock in on it. Well, this is the way it was before. This is the way it is now. This is the way it's going to be. What we have to do about it. You got to be constantly open to changing technologies, to changing attitudes, and be adaptable and leverage everything you need to leverage to be able to respond.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the interesting things I've noticed in the dental world, because we serve quite a few dentists, but I've noticed that a lot of dentists have taken shortcuts to web development, meaning, maybe their practice management software offers templated websites. But what I've noticed is because you have so many people or so many dentists in a tight geographic area that like chances are if you're in a small community and that like what I'm in and there's 23 dentists in the town and you guys are using the same practice management software, the chances are actually pretty high that your website is going to look very similar to somebody else in your town. And if you're not actually doing it strategically, it's going to sound the same. So what
Yeah.
you talked about differentiation, and I know Paul's going to go into that in the next question, but yeah, you're not giving people really key decision points to go, okay, these guys are different in this way. So
Right.
it's almost like you're only equipping people to make decisions based on aesthetics or price. It's like you're setting yourself up for failure sometimes.
Yeah, and here's a test, a real easy test. Screenshot your website, screenshot competitors' websites. If you're advertising in print, take the print ads, redact any identifying information. In other words, black out the business name, black out the address, the phone number, put them side by side, and then ask someone who's familiar with your business, but not necessarily in your business. But give them you're looking for an objective viewpoint. Put them in front of them and say, which one's mine? And if they can't clearly pick out which one's yours, then you're not doing it right. Your website is too generic or your ads are too generic. They're saying the same old thing. And that makes it hard to stand out in a saturated market when you're looking like just like everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. Hey, Paul, let's dig deeper into this idea. And it's a powerful idea of how small businesses can develop a unique value proposition, or also known as a core difference, essentially so that they can change the conversation.
Yeah, well, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but first of all, what sets your business apart? And we've talked about this before, and we offer good customer service or great customer. That is not a differentiator, okay? And we've talked about that in the past. Everybody says that. What makes you different? Why should people choose you? And you have to articulate the benefits that your product or service offers. How does it solve the customer's problems? A lot of times when you talk to business owners or go to a business website, it's all about them. It's not about how do they solve the customer's problems. And you mentioned that the templated websites, and that's a key factor because a lot of small businesses, they want to cheap out on their website, but branding is important. And if your website looks very similar to everyone else's website because they're all using, like you said about the dentist, they're using someone that uses these templated websites. To the average person, they're all the same. They don't see a difference. So they don't know that they are on your website as opposed to someone else's website. So your website is important, and making your website unique is important. And then you have to connect with your customers. You can use things like surveys to find out, just send surveys out. And sometimes you might want to use a third party. You may not want to do it yourself because a lot of times people aren't going to honestly answer questions if they know it's you doing the survey or you asking the questions. But feedback is important, and finding out where you can improve is important, and communicating with your customers, staying in touch with your customers. These are all important. They build that relationship, and anything like that sets you apart from your competitors is going to help. And I just don't know that I can add much more to that, but you have to find out what differentiates you from your competitors, and make those connections with your customers, clients, whatever it is.
Yeah, one example that comes to mind is one that John Jantz from Duct Tape Marketing shares a fair bit, or has over the years, and it was a client, a tree service client that they were doing strategic marketing for, and you think that tree service is fairly generic, that you have a tree, you need to remove it, you need to stump grind it, whatever it is, or you need pruning. There's a bunch of other services they can do, but traditionally it's limb removal, tree removal, stump removal. Those are the big services that they do. And I thought it was really interesting that they had interviewed customers. They had done some review of the clients' reviews of this business as well. And what they determined was one of the things that uniquely identified this business, or uniquely set them apart, was that they cleaned up. They had multiple blowers. So after they finished, stump grinding or tree removal, they would clean up the backyard so that it looked exactly like it did before the tree was removed. So you don't have wood chips everywhere, you don't have branches lying around, you don't have pieces of wood, things that could harm a kid, a dog, a family, and it's nice to look at. And I remember that really sticking out to me. And I've seen examples of that over and over, and we've done some things like that with our clients as well. There's a remodeling company I know of, and one of the cool things that they do, and this isn't their unique value proposition, but this goes into their unique value proposition, and that when they're working on a client's site, at the end of every day, they clean up the job site. So they're in people's homes. They clean up the area that they're working on, so they don't leave dust everywhere. They use machines that capture all the dust, but they hang up all their tools in like perfect rows. Like they actually use a laser level to put screws in their boards that they're working on, hang up every tool, and it just shows the level of detail, quality, and how they take care of people's property while they're building the property even better. Just relays a message to their clients in ways that other things couldn't. So I think, yeah. Any thoughts on that, Jeff? Any other further thoughts on a unique value proposition?
Yeah, I think again, it's got to be specific. And you mentioned interviews, and interviewing past clients, current clients is a great way to do that. And I think sometimes business owners struggle with finding a unique value proposition. They know they do good work, but we tell them, well, you can't just say we do good work. You have to substantiate it. And you start looking for those differences, and sometimes you find a golden nugget. You'll find something if you interview past and current clients, and you have 6 people that tell you, yeah, you guys are great and you do blah 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 really well, But what we really like is, and you hadn't even realized it, hey, you're onto something. You're onto something that's just second nature to you. You may think it's obvious to the world, but the rest of the world doesn't necessarily see that until you tell them about it. And that can be the differentiator that you can play up on. So yeah, I think that the interviews are great, and again, it's not about you, as Paul said. It's about getting in your ideal clients' heads and understanding what they're looking for. But then once you find those things, you've got to really use them. You got to use them everywhere. You've got to be consistent and across all of your marketing and talk about those things. Just play them up, play them up, play them up. Because you don't. That's the time when you don't necessarily want to be humble, right? If everybody tells you you do this really well, then trumpet your own horn, toot your own horn, and tell people we do this really well. And it's not just us saying that; it's our clients. And use it consistently throughout the materials and build around that. Don't just minimize it, build around that and say, this is how we're going to set ourselves apart from the rest of the competition.
Yeah, and further to that, make sure that if you do set something up as your core difference, that you actually stand behind it, that you don't lose that. So one example, not that they lost it, but that they do this is we have a dental client, and everything their patients say in reviews, in interviews, is that these guys are the most caring dental clinic they've ever been to. And so that became their core difference. But what if they stopped being caring, right? What if they became this kind of sterile relationship that a lot of dentists, a lot of practitioners tend to be? Then that they would create a dissonance between their core message and what they're delivering. So it's really important that once you do plant your flag on a core message, on a unique value proposition, that you have to stand behind that as a business, or you're going to burn bridges pretty quick.
I think another thing is don't get complacent with it, right? Test and monitor. I think Paul mentioned that. You can ask, you can survey. Just because it's a core difference this year doesn't mean it's going to be a core difference next year. If everyone else looks at what you're doing, your competition looks at what you're doing, and they say, oh, we're going to do that too. Well, now you need to search for something new. And that's pay attention to the competition and pay attention to your clients and make sure you're understanding what they're valuing. And if there is a shift going on, then you need to be first to react to it, not last.
Great point. Great point. Especially with generational changes, right? What Gen Z likes might not be the same as what attracts a Gen Xer or a boomer. So yeah, it pays to continue to monitor, evolve, tweak. One of the things you talked a little bit about, which is going to lead into Ken, who did a video answer to this, but Paul, I assume you have it queued up. But the question I was asking Ken is, what's this niching thing or niching thing, and how can it help a small business stand out in a saturated market?
Okay, so let's talk about this idea called niching or niching, depending on your preference. Basically, what you're doing here is you're not working at a higher level. I mean, you're really trying to drill down into a subsection of a market. So as an example, dentists might specialize in Invisalign, and that may be where they want to get their predominant chunk of their business. And so they're not going to talk about general dentistry. They don't want people coming in, just having fillings and things like that. They want to focus on straightening teeth, right? And so what you want to do is you want to really develop your core message around the ideal clients that you serve. It's not you don't want to be the everything to everybody kind of business. You're going to run yourself ragged. When you niche, you have the ability to focus on a standard set of products, solutions, systems, and you can get really good at that. You get efficient at it. So you probably are increasing your profitability when you do this over and over and over again. And also, you don't have to worry about trying to figure out something from scratch, brand new, each and every time. That can be lucrative, but it can also wear you out, and it ultimately is kind of the type of business that you kind of run into a brick wall because you can only serve so many people at any given time because of that type of a model. Niching gives you the ability to, because you're developing expertise in a specific solution and a subset of a market, you can ask for and get higher prices typically. Because of the specialization, you can develop a reputation, you can get customer loyalty and word of mouth because of that specific expertise that you have. So focusing on a niche is great. Now, that's not to say, I'd like to think that our niche as a company at Changescape is local SEO. That's where we're really good. We're really good at working with businesses that need to show up on the Google Maps results and, high in organic search. And so that's a specialization within a specific discipline of digital marketing, and the way that we package our local SEO services can be unique, and it can be our differentiator. We can take that and use that for any local business in a market, in any local market, or we could focus on being the local SEO experts for a particular niche. Either one of those is a step toward niching. There are pros and cons to getting too narrow. It is a lot more cost effective to go after that business, assuming that there is enough demand in that niche to fuel the needs of your business in terms of business growth and business sustainability. So niching is a really interesting idea. I think there's a lot of power to it, and definitely consider it as a differentiation.
Awesome. Ken had some great points there. Jeff, Paul, any additional thoughts, rebuttals, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think we're going to touch on some of the things he talked about moving forward here.
Yeah, I'll just add that, really the core concept behind niching down is that it allows you to focus your efforts and your attention. It's not necessarily to win. I'll just make up some numbers. It's not necessarily necessary to win 10% of the whole market. If you can win 80% of a subset of that market, you may come out ahead numbers wise, right? And you can focus your resources, you can focus your attention, and you can focus your delivery on what you do really well, and win that smaller market. What's the old saying? It's better to be a big fish in a small pond than a small fish in a big pond. And that's one way to outcompete. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but you can outcompete bigger companies by focusing resources.
Yeah. And one of the reasons why niching down can be so helpful to a business is because Ken talked a little bit about how it makes you more efficient at what you're doing. But some of the ways it makes you super efficient is you're able to better target people with advertising. Your message is very aligned with those specific people, so it resonates with them in a far better way than a general message would resonate. So there's lots of value in niching down. It just takes work and it takes guts, because essentially you're not saying we won't serve anyone else, but you are saying that our marketing efforts are going to be solely focused on this group of people in this specific way. And I know for a lot of business owners, that's a scary thing to think about. Like, and I'll just use dentists as an example. It could be any business, but with them, they think oftentimes anybody with teeth is a customer, right? And for us as marketing agencies, any business, it could be a potential customer. But there are people that our messages resonate with better than others. And most dentists have an affinity for serving a certain type of person with a certain type of problem. The same is true in all types of businesses. You just have to look for what you love doing, who you love serving, who you attract naturally, and that's a great place to start. The next question I wanted to ask, and this is more like a round table. I'll start with you, Jeff, and then we'll go to you, Paul. How can a small business, and feel free to jump in anytime, but how can a small business outcompete regional, national, and local competitors by leveraging digital marketing strategies more effectively?
Yeah, again, the larger competitors have, in a sense, necessarily have to work with a lot broader, a lot more generic audience. They may be focusing on bigger geographic markets, their resources. You may see the national advertisement, but when it comes down to the local market, is the local franchisee, if it's a franchise, the local outlet, are they getting as much support and as much resources? So I think, yeah, absolutely, small local businesses can outcompete. They can be more focused. They can put their resources in one place a lot easier, and really go after what they're looking for. So that starts to lead us into some strategies. Do you want to start digging into those now, Ian, or do you want to
Sure.
kind of
Yeah.
hold it? So,
Yeah.
I mean, the obvious low-hanging fruit one is local SEO, right? It's a lot easier to do a local SEO campaign than it is and win than it is to win for a given set of keywords than nationally. It's just, there's less. You're not trying to reach tens or hundreds of millions of people. You're trying to reach thousands to maybe a few million. So it's a lot easier to put the resources there. It's a little different. Local SEO, you've got to worry more about things like the Google business profile. Really have a good Google business profile and get that optimized. Treat it as social media. Put content posts on there that show you're an active, ongoing, involved business. Respond to reviews. You got to ask for reviews, and then when people give you reviews, you got to respond to them, good and bad. Respond to the bad ones, not aggressively, but appropriately. You got to think more localization on your website, more pages that talk about where you work. Use geo-targeted keywords. Make sure your name and address and phone numbers, basics we've talked about before, make sure that they're the same everywhere. And then look for local backlinks, reviews, or referrals, I should say, from other businesses that are adjacent to what you do, from the Chamber of Commerce, from the local, business organizations. Get involved with sponsorships and things that will get you broader attention. But it's a lot easier to do that on a local level than it is to and some of those things you can't even do realistically on a national level. But local SEO is the first place that I would go and talk about.
Yeah, and just to set up Paul for this question as well, one of the things. So my background, I was working for national and international businesses in the marketing teams, and one of the misconceptions is that big businesses have big budgets, and that's not the misconception. Usually, they do have bigger budgets than local businesses, but you have to remember these big businesses are spreading their budget across all of the different localities that they're trying to serve. And not only that, oftentimes, like if it's a franchise model, or if it's a national or regional business or even international business, and they have one main website that serves all their locations, they are at a tremendous disadvantage from a local SEO standpoint, because they're trying to use this central website to serve all those communities, which I see all the time, especially in home services, where they have national businesses, regional businesses, where they just have it. It's easy to manage. So you have to think from their perspective. They're a national or regional marketing department. They're looking at cost efficiencies and results, right, for the amount of spend they're putting into it. And so, yes, they want to help their franchises or the regional areas grow, but they also have a limited budget for all of those areas that they're spreading across everywhere. So don't always think that big budget means they're going to use that whole budget in my locality. You have to remember it's spread out. So sometimes you might have a bigger budget than they actually do for serving your community.
And even the side effects of them spreading that budget out tend to water down and make their messaging more generic, right? If you're talking, I'll just make up house painting. If you're talking about house painting in Austin, Texas, it's very different than house painting in Portland, Oregon. And I pull that out of the air because I was just visiting my brother this week. That's where he lives. You've got a lot different climate, so different times of year you commit. So the messaging has to be different, and a local business can do that a lot easier than a national company.
Yeah. What about you, Paul? Thoughts on how a small business can outcompete larger competitors with digital marketing?
Yeah, well, there's Jeff was talking about local SEO and Google Business Profile, and a lot of things have changed with Google Business Profile. There's a lot of wrong and outdated information out there. There's things you can do. Bright Local actually just published a white paper, I guess you'd call it, that they did where on your, and I'm not going to go too deep into this, but on your categories, and the legal industry is kind of the outlier, but you pick your primary category and you really don't want any up to 4 subcategories will help you rank. You start adding more than that and it actually works against you, which is contradictory to what happened, just a couple years ago. So you have to stay up to date on these things. I'm gonna get myself in trouble here. We talk about paid advertising and ad retargeting, and that's a good thing to do, but these things are not free. We have clients, we talked about this in the past. They want to do some form of pay-per-click, usually Google Ads, and they want to cover a certain area for these services, and I have $300 to spend. It's like you're wasting your money because you're probably not going to get results unless you pick one small area and one service. You might get some results, but you have to look at paid advertising from the standpoint of what's the average cost per click in your industry. So the way Google Ads works, for instance, is let's say you have $300 to spend. That's roughly $10 a day. And if let's say your average cost per click is $5, $4, that means if 2 people click on your ad and you could be done 10 o'clock in the morning. If 2 people have clicked on your ad's not going to show anymore for that day because you've spent your budget for that day. You have to have enough budget to get enough impressions, to get enough clicks to actually get people to convert, because most people, they don't convert the first time they click on an ad or when they go to their website. Conversion rates are a good conversion rate on pay per click, and this varies by industry. You're looking at 3-4%, 5%. So you have to keep these things in mind. I get it with small businesses that the resources are finite, money's finite. But if you don't have enough money, if you don't have a big enough budget to really get results, then maybe you should spend that money somewhere else.
Yeah. The one thing I would add to that, Paul, where if you have a very limited budget, you'll have to figure out another way to get people to your website, right? If the ads aren't the way you're going to get them there. But retargeting can be extremely cost effective. Like for some of our clients, they put $7 a day towards their retargeting efforts. Now, usually it's combined with an ad, a much higher ad campaign that they're spending on and stuff like that. But the retargeting, because you're only advertising to people that have been to your website, it can be super cost effective.
Yeah, retargeting can be, but again, that goes back to the reason you run ads is to get people to your website so you can retarget them. You have to get people to your website before you can retarget them.
100%. Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts, guys?
I was going to say, I think in the local space, it's a lot easier. Again, I go back to the messaging, but it's not just messaging. It's tuned to your locale. It's just what's going on locally. If you're a national roofer, maybe hard to adjust to weather climate in each market. But if you're a local roofer, boy, a hailstorm hits and you know a lot of people are going to need new roofs, you can be out on Google Ads or in the mail boxes, via postcards, literally within a couple of days. So I think personalizing the content to what's going on in a locale, personalizing it to the attitudes of the people, the culture of what's going on, I think is a lot easier to do, and you can do that very effectively as a small local business. Then, of course, bring in the case studies of the people nearby. If I'm in Austin, Texas, I don't really care about the ownership experience of a truck owner in Minnesota, in the cold weather, right? You can start to personalize things for your local market and use that to your advantage. You can use the retargeting, as we talked about, to stay top of mind. And I think when it comes to social media, you can also build a lot stronger following on social media by being a figure in the community. Personalize it, let your hair down, pull back the curtain, whatever term you want to use, kind of show off your business, show off your personality, and really build a sense of community. I think it's a lot easier to do that locally than it is to do that, big nationally. And then just going back to the notion of differentiating competition in general. The businesses that do that, the businesses that people identify with more, they gravitate more, are the ones that are going to win. And that's because they are being a little different. They are celebrating that and promoting that.
Yeah, I go ahead, Paul.
I know we're talking about digital, or focusing on digital marketing here, but direct mail can be very effective, and it doesn't have to be super expensive. We have something, and it's different. It's going to be different for different industries, but like let's say you're a home remodeler and you want to target wealthier areas in your in your area that you serve. You can do that, and direct mail can be a very effective way to do that, especially if it's combined with some kind of pay-per-click, or some kind of other kind of outreach strategy, because you see it all the time. It's, you run some ads, some digital ads, and then you send some direct mail. And especially if you take the time to personalize that direct mail to these areas these people that you want to focus on, that can be very effective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and make sure you're tying it into your digital efforts, right? So QR codes, phone tracking, and then we were talking about retargeting earlier. Well, if you're not paying for paid ads to get people to your website, but you're doing direct mail, man, you should be retargeting those people.
Yep.
Crazy. Yeah, crazy big.
And vice versa, if you're using online to get people to your website, use postcard retargeting. We talked about that an episode or two back, right?
Yeah.
Again, we're marketing systems. Everything's got to work together. It's not just one tactic that's a silver bullet. It's leveraging multiple tactics working together.
Yeah, and one of the things, Paul, you were talking about like the expense of advertising, and it is, right? If you're not spending $1,000 on Google ads or even Facebook ads, you're probably not going to get the reach you want, the engagement you want. But if you are doing that and you're still having trouble because your competition is so high in a saturated marketplace, one of the strategies that we've been testing out with some of our clients is, if they're located in a fairly large metropolitan area or even like a large suburb, we've started actually doing, I don't know, I haven't come up with a catchy term for it, but like halo marketing, where the most expensive clicks are actually in that metropolitan area, but surrounding it is a host of smaller towns where the big guys aren't spending as much money. And so if you're nimble enough, sometimes you can uncover these opportunities where if you can kind of crack the code, do some pilot testing that the other guys probably aren't going to do because they're managing much larger budgets potentially, or they're looking at far more regions, then you can be a lot more nimble and find and uncover some low-hanging fruit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pay-per-click has gotten expensive, and it really goes back to COVID, when people realized that people weren't going anyplace. Everyone was at home, and a lot of businesses realized that they that this digital marketing thing was a real thing and they actually had to engage in it. And pay-per-click got more expensive. And I know no small business wants to hear this, and it varies with industry. But if you're not spending $1,500 to $2,000 a month on ad spend, you're probably not going. And in a smaller area, that might not be true. But the reality is, if you don't have that budget, you're probably not going to get the results you want, because we see this all the time. We have an attorney out in Nevada as a client, and he'll spend up to $4,000 a month on Google Ads, and then he'll call me up and say, "Hey, I need to cut back on my ad spend because I can't get, I'm not getting, I can't keep up with the work I have." And you can see it within a couple of weeks. We'll cut his ad spend down to $2,000 a month, and you can see that those leads just drop off. And then he'll call me up and say, "Okay, let's kick it back up again." And within a couple of weeks, the leads increase, and it's because he's spending that amount of money.
Yeah, and one of the things our listeners, viewers should know is that because we've been in the industry long enough, we've seen the rise of costs related to things. And of course, I think everybody with inflation has seen a steep rise in everything from bread to services, right? To getting your roof done. And it's not that, Google Ads or any of the ad platforms aren't effective. I want to make that really clear. It's just the costs have gone up, but still those platforms, those strategic methods of reaching new customers are still way more efficient than a lot of more traditional, like, if you think of TV ads or radio ads or even direct mail, it's more efficient to do Google ads or Facebook ads, some of these digital channels, than it is to do the more traditional methods. It's just we've seen the rise. So we probably have to caution ourselves a little bit with falling back on saying that, because quite frankly, it's still efficient. It's just, less cost effective than we saw years ago when it wasn't as saturated. So Jeff, talk a bit about how small businesses can create customized solutions to help them compete better in a busy market.
Yeah, so I think, again, we're talking about standing out. We're talking about differentiating, being unique, and really, if you can put yourself in a class of one, then you by default will win that class, right? So I think customized solutions or personalizing your service offerings, your products, is a great way to do that, because hey, who else is doing what I'm doing? Now eventually the competition might catch on, they might start doing similar, and then there's that dance, right? Then you look for the next thing to stay ahead. But so what are some ideas to do that is really what this question's all about. One of them is personalize products and services as much as you possibly can. Don't try and be one size fits all. When you communicate, even you can communicate personally. You can use CRMs. You can put names into it instead of dear homeowner. Put the person's name. But you can identify needs that different subsets of your target audience has, and you can craft your products and services around those needs. It doesn't necessarily have to be to the individual person. Some things might be like communication, if that's easy to do. Other things, it may be subsets or groups of people that you're just doing a better job of meeting their needs. If you do offer a high level of customization, I'm thinking, a tailor shop, a dress shop, we're going to do custom. We're not going to do buy it off the rack and we'll alter it. It's like, we're going to take measurements and make something for you. Long time ago, I was traveling overseas. I had a custom suit cut. It was an amazing experience. I still remember it. I still think about it. Any business that can kind of do something a little more to my liking, a little more specific, is going to naturally, be where I want to go. You can get the customers involved in the process, make them part of the solution. If you're a house painter, don't just go and say, well, we're going to paint your house. Say, well, let's talk about colors. Do you want to change the color? Do you want to change, maybe a little more sophisticated, if it's an exterior 2-color, 3-color scheme? Do you want to paint trim around the one? Get them involved with what you're doing. Just don't have the one size fits all. Be willing to customize and then bring them into the discussion. let them feel some ownership in it, get them excited about it. And guess what? They're going to talk about that experience, right? They're going to say, yeah, don't go with those other guys. They're just going to come in and slap some paint on. These guys are really going to listen to what I'm doing. I'm going to get what I want. They're going to talk about options. They're going to talk about trade-offs. Again, differentiation. Flexible pricing or packaging to let them meet their needs. You got to be a little careful in there because the overhead can start to be overwhelming, but within reason, anything you can do to, again, tailor solutions. I think, originally the car auto industry started out with, you can have every color, any color you want as long as it's black, right? And then they moved into, I remember my dad going to buy a car. It was like the big long menu. Do you want power door locks? Yes or no. Do you want power windows? It was like you had a car custom built for you. And then the car manufacturers figured out that wasn't efficient. It was costing them too much money. And then they went back to, well, you're going to have packages. You start to see the convenience package, the value package. And then it's like, well, every car just comes with this. You have 3 levels of trim. So you got to find that right level of how do you customize and be efficient about it. But don't just be the business that says, this is the way we do it. Either do business with us or not, because eventually you won't have a lot of business. And part of that is listening to customer feedback. What do they want? What are they looking for? And then go for long-term relationships. Be there for your customers. Make your customers front and center of everything you do. We talked earlier about starting with the messaging. That way, I think Paul mentioned it. Make the customers front and center of everything you do. Be willing to be flexible. Be willing to tailor things. That doesn't mean let them walk all over you or own you, but you just got to do it more and better than your competition is, and then you'll win.
Yeah, and this isn't customization, but it kind of fits within this world where you're shaping your business around your customers' needs. And we've talked about this before, but just answering the phones and answering them well quickly, it can be a huge differentiator in this marketplace, because so many businesses have gone to the voicemail or really bad call centers or whatever it is. And not getting back to people quickly can set you up for failure for sure. But I know that's not really personalization, but it makes the person, the reason you do customization and personalization is to create that resonance with the buyer right away. And I think that can be, almost like a try, like a no-like try. They're already testing you out when they phone you.
Yeah. And the technology, a lot of these personalization things, the technology lets you do a lot of it easily. I'm thinking, there's in Austin, there's a great taco business, Torchy's Tacos, and I get a text from them, on my birthday. Hey, come on in. We've got a free taco for you. Even using your CRM, your text messaging system to personalize to certain aspects of what you know about people can be a big difference.
So easy to
Call,
do.
text back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Paul, that leads right into you. So let's explore the idea of how a small business can build a strong brand identity and how that helps them compete.
That can be summed up in 2 words: brand consistency. Okay, you have your logo. Every business should have a logo. They should have their logo, their color palette, their font. And it's, like I said, brand consistency. Now, if you're, say, in the legal industry, you probably don't want an artistic style of font, but it's less about the font.
Comic Sans.
Yep, absolutely. That's what every accountant should use. That's a font for every accountant. But it's really less about the font and more about using that font consistently. So working on a website a while back, we inherited, we were rebuilding the website, and whoever built this website, they used 4 different fonts across the website. Okay. 2 is okay.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to be consistent. You don't want to use 4 or 5 different fonts across your website. So be consistent with your font, have a color palette, and be consistent with that. You want your logo to be distinctive, and size your logo for the respective platform that you're on, because Look at social media. Some of them want a square logo. Some of them want an elongated logo. So you're going to have the logo itself needs to be consistent, obviously, in, what the logo is, but it also has to fit the platform that you're using it on. And a tagline, we talk about this, that, have a distinctive tagline and use that consistently. Something that I think Jeff talked about. If someone goes to your website within a few seconds, can they know what you do? All right. You have to be consistent with that. And if people have to figure out what you do, then they're going to go away. They're going to go someplace else. So it really comes down to consistency. And because if you want to build a brand identity, you have to be consistent with everything you do related to your brand.
Here's one of my pet peeves is don't just pick a logo out of the logo types that are available on the $15 business card platforms. I mean, your logo should reflect you and your brand and your brand personality and your ideal client audience and what you want to mean to them. So, I mean, logos, maybe you get a logo for a few $100. It doesn't have to be thousands and thousands of dollars, but don't just go to the logos, catalog.
Yeah, and don't underestimate the importance of a logo, because a lot of times that is what people, and more often than not, I would say the vast majority of people, that is what they associate with a brand, is that logo. It's not the tagline is important and what you do is important, but I would say the vast majority of people, the first thing they associate with a business is that logo. Yeah. Because you can look at that. We are visual creatures. Humans are visual creatures, and that logo identifies your brand, and that's the first thing people notice. So if you're going to spend some money on something related to your brand, it really should be that logo.
Mm-hmm. And I would just emphasize with people that your brand is not your logo. Your brand is actually, imagine if you look at your brand of your business as a person. Your brand is your logo is the face, but your brand is so much more than that. It's how you do the business you do. It's how you interact with people. It's the messaging platform you use versus your competition. It's kind of the ethos of your business. So don't get stuck into just thinking, a great logo is my brand, because a lot of businesses traditionally, especially small businesses, have fallen into that world. And that's how I started my career as a graphic designer. So I was in that mentality, but I learned pretty quickly that brand identity is far more than your logo. But we all get sucked into that because we see the Apples, we see the Nikes, all of those things where they become synonymous with a logo. As a small business, you're not going to be Nike, you're not going to be Apple. You need to think about the ethos of your business and how that differentiates you, for sure. But your logo has to be good.
That's why I said when you should have a custom logo, but when you develop it, you've got to take into consideration the personality of the business, what you stand for, and what will your ideal clients identify with. And then you're absolutely right, Ian. It's more than just the graphics too. It's and I think, Paul, you mentioned it. It's how you talk about things. It's the voice you use, the tone you use. And then even how actively you bring your customers into helping establish and promote your brand. Use them to tell the story, engage them on social media. That's all part of brand identity. And really, I think community is the word that's starting to be used more and more. You're building a community around your brand, and then leveraging all the things that go with that.
Yeah. Well, hey, I want to keep us moving forward. I don't even know if we're going to get through all the questions I had for you guys today, but I had one for Ken, and he did a recording. How can a business highlight their unique benefits and features to stand out in the marketplace? And I think this is a really key question.
Okay, let's talk about, how businesses can really highlight and emphasize the unique benefits and features that they offer to stand out in a marketplace. First of all, they have to be truly different, right? Not everybody is going to be the best customer service. Everybody wants to try to say that, but that's really not very meaningful. The way that you can take advantage of this is, you could have a warranty or a guarantee, or you could have certain things like you're the only company in a market authorized to deliver a service, or you may be the only business certified in a particular methodology to deliver a service, even though more people could be certified in that same geography, they just haven't. And so that can be a differentiator for you. And so you want to call attention to that. You want to, when people are looking at how you can help them solve their problem, they need to see and they need to feel like, the solution you have speaks to their problem. So, what are the things that you do that your competitors can't or won't offer? Are there, like I said, it could be even, fast delivery times, turnaround times. We guarantee that a job will be done by a certain time. You could do side-by-side comparisons to highlight, how working with you is going to be different than maybe working with a competitor. It could be feature driven, or it could be experiential driven, and even aspirational driven in the way that you communicate this. You really want to help people, when they're looking at your business, you want to get them to think about, okay, here's what life's going to look like if I work with these folks. And to the extent that you can do that in the way that and the content you have on your website, the language you have on your website, the structure that you have on your website is really going to help you to be able to do that. People, they're not ready to buy when they land on a website for the first time, typically. So you need to think about, what do you need to do to kind of move them through the buyer's journey? Do they need to know more information about you? Do they need to be able to download something or watch a webinar or a how-to video to see that you guys, your business actually has the difference in the way that you solve those problems for a client that really speaks to them, and then really just I think it's critical. If you use problem solution language on your website, you're probably going to be ahead of most of your competitors, because most competitors, they just, they kind of spew out, we do this, and it's all feature driven. It's all, specifying, a solution that's done, but not really talking about the value, not really talking about how it addresses the problem. And so I think if you just spend time really highlighting that, I'm a big fan of StoryBrand. I think it's a great tool to be able to use, to really zero in on identifying what those benefits are. I'm sure we've talked about, in this podcast, as well as we always do, that strategy, defining a strategy, identifying who your ideal customers are, really drilling down into what it is that they want and need, and how do they see your business as different in the first place, and just doubling down on that and emphasizing that through the language you have on your website.
Yeah. And it's interesting because most businesses fall into the trap of talking about features. This is what we do, or this is what the product does, and not the benefits. So how is this going to change my life as a consumer, as the business owner? Guys, I know we just reached the top of the hour. We have a bunch of other questions I wanted to cover, but I think we might need to stick a pin in that and make a 2.0 follow up to this podcast. Any other thoughts you want to make sure we included in today's conversation?
Well, I think just to recap a little bit, it's absolutely possible to compete and win in a tight, competitive, saturated marketplace. Essentially, that's what capitalism is all about, right? So don't let it scare you. but figure out how to do it and get help with it if you're having a tough time. It's absolutely doable.
I think it's really about realistically recognizing the market you're in, the competitive environment you're in, and setting expectations and being realistic about what it's going to take to compete.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the parting thoughts I would have for people too is that just what you said right there, Paul, it's so hard for business owners if they don't have the tools or the expertise to actually know how they're competing in the marketplace. So I would encourage people, like, reach out to one of the marketing guides. We all do audits, marketing audits, I think, for our clients. It's a paid audit process, but it uncovers tons and tons of value for you as far as how you're competing with your competition, where you're strong, where you're weak, where they're strong, where they're weak. These things are really, really powerful and will help you tremendously. And I know in the audits that we do, we also cover things like the branding and how you're different. Do you have a core difference? If so, what is it? Or are you all vanilla with the competition?
Mm-hmm.
Well, guys, we did a great job on this. There was just so much information here. I wish we could have covered it all. Again, we'll probably do a follow-up to this sometime. But I think this is a great place to stop. For our viewers and listeners, I hope you found value in this. I know I've been hearing a lot more about this in the groups I've been involved in on Facebook and whatnot, where people are just feeling, they're saturated marketplaces and they feel helpless. So I hope the big idea that you take away, that I think both Paul and Jeff have shared very well, is that you're not a victim. Market saturation is part of a growing marketplace. You just need to figure out how to fit well into that and how to attract your ideal patients, clients, customers, and you'll do well. So thank you for joining us today. We invite you to submit your questions to us, to share this podcast with colleagues, friends, family members, dogs, cats, frogs, anybody you want to share it with. We would love it. And we hope that this has helped you grow your business. And until next week, keep calm and market on, folks.